As you might expect, after more than 800 years of continuous evolution, some aspects of the graduation ceremony you're about to take part in have become rather arcane. Over the next few minutes, the Praelector and I will try to explain exactly what will soon happen to you and roughly what it all means. The origins of the graduation ceremony are lost in the mist of time. In the 12th century, when the first universities were being set up to rival the monasteries as centres of education and learning, the groups of scholars modelled themselves on the medieval guilds. Guilds, as you may know, were corporations of artisans, craftsmen, merchants and other professions set up to further the interests of their members and to maintain standards. To maintain standards, you can see a parallel already. Members of the medieval guilds progressed through three ranks. The lowest was apprentice, next was journeyman, and finally master craftsman. Similarly, as members of the University of Cambridge, you progress through three stages. You are now, but not for much longer, in the lowest, corresponding to the apprentices of the guild. You were admitted to this stage when you matriculated at the beginning of your apprenticeship here 3 or 4 years ago, in a ceremony in Upper Hall, presided over by myself, a ceremony you may now hardly remember. You'll be elevated to the second stage today when you become a BA of the university. The third stage comprises the Masters of Arts of the university, corresponding to the Master Craftsman of the Guild. To become a master, a medieval guildsman had to produce a masterpiece. The requirements for you to achieve the equivalent status of MA are rather less rigorous. All you have to do is to fill in a form and stay out of prison for 3 years. And I'm not even sure if the latter requirement is still actually enforced. Every time the guildsman passed to a higher stage, there was an elaborate ceremony, and that pattern is followed for the university. Your graduation ceremony is based on the ceremony in which apprentices became journeymen. The earliest reference to the Cambridge ceremony itself is from the 17th century, and the ceremony then seems to be very much as it is now. The ceremony takes place in the Senate House, which is, and I quote from a guidebook, that handsome Corinthian edifice of Portland stone in the form of a rectangular parallelepiped situated opposite the university church. You may possibly have noticed it. It was completed in 1730. The ceiling is of white plaster divided into quadrangular compartments, each richly decorated in the Italian style. It is certainly a masterpiece, and I commend it to you if you have a spare moment to look upwards during the ceremony. It is appropriate that your degree is to be conferred in the Senate House because the Senate House is essentially the source of all your problems. Before the Senate House was built, there were none of those inconvenient examinations that so disrupt the pleasant ebb and flow of student life. There were no examinations because examination papers needed to be read out to the candidates, and there was simply no building in Cambridge large enough to accommodate all the students. Before 1730, students only took one examination for the BA degree, and that was oral. It took the form of a dispute, or wrangle, as it was called, between the student and a senior member of the university who sat on a three-legged stool called the tripos stool. The students who were most successful disputing or wrangling were called wranglers. With the coming of the Senate House came formal written examinations. In those days, the Senate House was not a comfortable place to sit an exam. There was no heating, and sometimes it was so cold that the ink froze in the inkwells. The term tripos, so intimately associated with the examination process, was then used to refer to the list of successful candidates, the tripos list. I should mention that the tripos lists were not then determined with the dispassionate precision that went into your classification. In fact, there was a splendid provision by which the examiners could insert into the list at any position the names of any 4 members of the university of their choice, who didn't even need to have taken the examination in question. My predecessor, Dr. Siklos, tells me there have been occasions in the past, not this year fortunately, when it would have been rather handy to have still had this provision. After some time, actually quite a lot of time, changes in Cambridge tend to happen on geological timescales, the word tripos attached itself to the actual examination, and there it has remained. At first, there was only one tripos in mathematics. And in fact, most successful candidates in the mathematical tripos are still called wranglers. There is a wrangler among you today. It wasn't until 1824 that a second tripos, namely the classical tripos, appeared, but even then you couldn't study for the classical tripos without first taking part one of the mathematical tripos. Now there are several tens of triposes, most of them represented among you. The degree ceremony in the Senate House begins when the Vice-Chancellor's procession enters the building, led by the senior Esquire Bedell carrying a ceremonial mace that was presented at the university in 1626. Time was when the Vice-Chancellor himself conferred degrees solidly for 2 full days. Now the process takes 4 days, but there is a sensible and rather nice arrangement whereby for each college, the head of house acts as the Vice-Chancellor's deputy. So your degree will be conferred by our master, Professor Ian White. After welcoming visitors, the senior proctor proposes a Latin grace called the collective supplicat. I will ask our Praelector, the Rev'd Dr Paul Dominiak, to recite the grace in Latin, and then for the benefit of parents and other guests listening to the audio relay, to translate it into English.
Supplicant reverentis vestris viri mulieresque, quorum nomino juxta sonaculum in portico proposuit, hodie registrarius nec delavet pro cancellarius ut gradum quisque quem rite petavit assequanta. Those men and women whose names the registry has today posted in the arcade beside the Senate House, and which the Vice-Chancellor has not deleted. Beg your reverences that they may proceed to the degree for which each has properly applied.
There is then a short pause to allow any MA of the university to object to the grace by shouting, "Non placet." If there are no objections, the junior proctor says placet, it pleases. If all that passes off smoothly, the Esquire Bedell leads the Vice-Chancellor's deputy to the chair at the front of the dais, and the presentation of graduands begins. The Praelector presents the graduands to the Vice-Chancellor's deputy in groups of 4, each graduand holding one of the 4 fingers on his right hand. Not in a vice-like grip, please. Bear in mind that each praelectorial finger will be gripped some 40 times today. And in any case, you're only being led 1 pace forward, so there is no need to hang on for dear life. There is no particular significance to the business of the fingers. Originally, the Praelector would have led each graduate forward by the hand, but in these days of mass production of graduates, it is done in batches of 4. The Praelector then says,
Dignissime Domine, Domine pro cancellare et tota academia, presente rebes, hos vidas, quasqueo tamaribus, cum doctrina esse donios, ad gradum assequendum, bacillare natibus, idque tibi fide mea presse to tequae academiae. Most worthy Vice-Chancellor and the whole university, I present to you this man or woman or these people, whom I know to be suitable as much by character as by learning, to proceed to the degree of Bachelor of Arts, or whatever you're getting today, for which I pledge my faith to you and the whole university.
Note that the Praelector is personally vouching not only for your learning, but also for your morals. I cannot imagine that anyone here present today is defective in the latter department, but if there's anything you think the Praelector should know about, you can approach him after this rehearsal. The Esquire Bedell will then call each graduand in turn by name, and you step forward and kneel. You place your hands together and advance them cautiously towards the master. The master will then clasp your hands in his and utter the magic formula.
Auctoritate mea commissa admitto te a gradum, bacillare natibus, in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. By the authority committed to me, I admit you to the degree of Bachelor of Arts, or whatever degree you're getting, in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, unless you've asked for that to be omitted.
After the first group has been presented, the same degree, abbreviated formulae are often used, the Praelector saying,
Hos etiam presento et his edem rebis praeste. These all I also present, and of them I give you the same pledge.
so an elaborate ditto. And so passes to you the spirit of education and learning that has been passed from scholar to scholar, hand to hand, down an unbroken line stretching back through the ages to the beginnings of the university more than 800 years ago. You then rise. I wouldn't say that this is intrinsically a dangerous ceremony, but there is at exactly this point an element of risk. As you kneel, your gown will have fallen naturally over the backs of your legs. It is quite likely to get caught on the heel of your shoe. If it is still caught on the heel of your shoe when you try to rise, you will get about halfway up and then find yourself rotating rapidly about a horizontal axis, causing you to somersault backwards through the air. Those of you who have done what one might call the premier tripos, by which I mean engineering of course, will recognise that this is simply the consequence of imposing an unresisted rotational moment. It is inevitable. But I don't want to alarm you unduly. The Praelector will do his best to prevent this happening by unhooking your gown from your heel. Nevertheless, you should yourself exercise care. If the Praelector fails in his unhooking duty, the consequence to him at worst will be that he is fined a bottle of port by the proctors. But the consequences to you is that you will find yourself supine on the floor, looking up at the quadrangular compartments of the white plaster ceiling, each richly decorated in the Italian style. While the proctors, the esquire bedels, the vice-chancellor's deputy, the other graduands and the audience look on. The ceiling, as I mentioned, is a masterpiece, but there are better moments at which to admire it. Having successfully negotiated this hurdle and arrived in a vertical position, you bow. This bow is important. It is the last formal act you perform before leaving the Senate House and marks both the closure of your undergraduate career and the start of your life as a graduate. Never mind all those examinations that went a bit wrong, all those supervisions where you were reduced to abject silence, all those times when the ball hit the post, or those wrong notes were played or sung. A correctly executed bow will draw a veil over all those unhappy memories, and you will leave Cambridge with that comfortable feeling that when it really mattered, you came up with the goods. So you need to rehearse your bow. It is not an extravagant bow from the waist like a pantomime Puss in Boots. Nor is it a jerk of the head of the sort that occurs when you wake up abruptly at a lecture. It is certainly not a chummy little nod, a prelude to "Yo, master," and a high five. It is a courteous and deferential inclination of the head and shoulders, denoting respect to the Vice-Chancellor's deputy and the great institution he is representing, an appreciation of the honour just bestowed upon you. The Praelector will now demonstrate the perfect bow. Skip that bit. The master will acknowledge your bow with a slight nod. A congratulatory nod, a nod that signifies recognition of the fact that you are now a Cambridge BA. In some cases, it may also signify astonishment at this fact, but it is the same nod. You won't be able to tell the difference. You say nothing at this point or any other point in the ceremony. Even if you do know the Latin for thanks very much, do not be tempted to display your linguistic prowess. Do not disturb the decorum of the Senate House with Sharapova-like exhalations when you bow. And no gestures either, please. No punching the air or waving to the crowd. Finally, you make your way to the far right of the Senate House, where you will be presented with your degree certificate. You exit through what is called the doctor's door into Senate House Passage. I and the head porter will be waiting outside to congratulate you and shake your hand. After the last graduand has left the building, one of the esquire bedels calls the congregation to order with the words "Magistry," masters. All stand. The Vice-Chancellor's deputy dissolves the congregation with the words "Nos dissolvimus hanc congregationem." and leaves in procession, led by the Esquire Bedels and followed by the proctors, pro-proctors, and the university marshal. Others present remain standing until the procession has passed out of the Senate House and may then leave. By this time, you will be waiting for your guests on the Senate House lawn, resplendent in, and I hope rightly proud of, your new and well-deserved status as a BA of the University of Cambridge. And I'll now hand over to Paul for some role play.
The senior tutor has very clearly articulated what happens during a congregation of Senate House, but we're going to think a little bit first about the schedule for the day and how we get to Senate House, and then we're going to do a bit of role play about what actually happens in Senate House, so just so you have something to visualize when you get there. Immediately after this rehearsal, there'll be a small little break, and there'll be some more instructions about that break following this instruction session. But we'll be leaving from this lecture theatre to get to Chapel Court for the photograph. But to prevent people getting crammed or mixed up with guests, you, as the graduands, will be leaving out of the West Court entrance onto Jesus Lane, turning immediately left and walking all the way up Jesus Lane until you get to the car park entrance at the top of Jesus Lane. The gates will be open, you walk through and you circle into Chapel Court for the photograph. When you're in Chapel Court, you will be arranged into your processional order. As Geoff has mentioned, this will be in groups of 4 or fewer. Most of you, I think there's only one exception, will be in a group. I think the exception is Richard Burkett, since you're the only M-Math this year. You'll be by yourself, but at the front of the procession. But it's very, very important to remember that processional order. So you're arranged alphabetically by the degree into which you will be admitted. You must stay in that processional order when we process after the photograph to Senate House. That is simply because in Senate House you are called by name as well as by degree, and you don't want to be called by someone else's name. So you'll be checked and checked and checked to make sure you've stayed in that processional order. There are 2 congregations and 2 sessions today. So if your name, family name, ends in a letter between A and E inclusive, you'll be in session 1. The remainder of the alphabet will be in session 2. You will be invited according to which session you're...
BAs. Well, I think this is in the first session.
BAs and the various masses in the first session. So if you're getting a masses, definitely go to the first session. Thank you, senior tutor. You will be arranged into that processional order again once you get into first court, and the processional route is the following. If you're in session 1, I'll be leading you. If you're in session 2, it'll be the president. But we go up the chimney, turning immediately right onto Jesus Lane, but not crossing the street. And then you proceed down Jesus Lane, having bravery to cross the road towards the Quaker Friends Meeting House. Continuing over and then processing down All Saints Passage, turning left onto Trinity Street, and we'll walk down Trinity Street to the entrance to Senate House, where we'll gather again and be invited in when it's time in our processional order. But what happens inside Senate House? And this is the time for a bit of role play. So I'm going to look for some volunteers. And this is where everyone looks away. Will and Dan. Two Maybole presidents. We'll have you both. And Alex, you're looking panicked, so you're in. And Lydia, you're laughing at Alex, so you're in too. So I'm going to arrange you, if you just have your back to the wall, but just in front of the lectern. All side by side, like you like each other. Wonderful. So these will be an example of the group you will have been arranged into. And if you imagine that these ladies and gentlemen and Will are the first 4 to be invited forward. So we'd be invited forward by college. So, for example, Jesus College, Bachelor of Arts, I'll be stood just here. You come all the way forward, and you take a finger each. Come on, latch on. Now, intuitively, these four wonderful people have done the right thing. You can let go for a second. Now, it's very important to get the right finger. Who's seen the movie Ghostbusters? Who's seen the movie Ghostbusters? New or old? Most people. What is the one rule in Ghostbusters? I want everyone to say it. What's the one rule in Ghostbusters? I can't hear you. Say it again. Everyone together. Never cross the streams. Never cross your hands taking my fingers. And that is simply because you will get all in a muddle. If you are the furthest away from me, which would be Will in this instance, you take my index finger. If you are the next person, so Dan, you would take the finger next to it. Lydia would take the third. Alex, you get my little pinky if you were there, if you're closest to me. So if you imagine you've all taken a finger. If there are fewer than four of you, just take one finger. If you're Richard Baquette, you take my whole hand because you are the only person being admitted. And then, as we've already heard, I will present you to have your degree conferred. So, dignissime Domine Praelector, Tutor Academia, presente Rebes, hos veras et has mulieras, quosque maribus, cum doctrina esse idonios, ad gradum ad sequendum, bachelore in artibus, id quae tibi fide mea presto tequae academiae. Then you let go. And then one by one, you'd be invited forward. I'm going to invite everyone except Will to go back to your seat so everyone can see clearly about how to kneel. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Lydia. Thank you, Dan. A round of applause for those three wonderful people. So if you imagine, you can stay where you are for a second, but there is a cushion which you will kneel on. And the Deputy to Vice Chancellor, the Silver Fox himself, our master, will be seated in this chair. Well, not this chair, but a nicer chair than that. You will be invited forward by name, so Will Thirlwell. And you would step forward, and then you would kneel, 2 knees, straight down, wonderful. Try to remember to swoosh your gown off your heels. So you don't want it on your shoes, you want it off, just like that. Perfectly straight, erect back, wonderful. That's simply to stop the master having to lean all the way forward. It also makes it easy for you to stand back up. But then you clasp your hands as if you were praying, just like this. Can everyone see that okay? Up there too. So you're praying or begging for, or supplicating for your degree. And then I'll pretend I'm Ian for a minute. One day. Fairly long odds, Geoff, but you would clasp your hands and say, Auctoritate mea commissa admittite gradum bachelare in artibus, in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Unless you've asked for the Trinitarian declaration to be admitted, it will then release you, and you stand straight up. Wonderful. And then we're going to see if Will was paying attention to the bow. You give your reverential bow. Beautiful. Thank you, Luke. Go back to your seat. At that point, you exit the Senate House. You cannot go wrong at this point. There is only one door open in the whole building, which will be in the top right corner. To help you, it also has a big exit sign above it. To help you even further, there will be one of the proctors standing there to help you leave the building. You encircle round into the Senate House gardens and await everyone else to be admitted, and at the end of a session, your family and friends or guests will also be allowed to leave the building and join you there. I think the only thing I forgot to mention was when you are kneeling, there will be a photograph taken. So the photograph, the camera is just by the exit, the doctor's door. So nice straight back, look the master straight in the eye, you'll get a great photograph. I think, unless I'm forgetting anything, Geoff, I think that's everything for the kind of practical rehearsals. But does anyone have any questions? Any questions, Ore?
Sorry. You know with the finger thing?
Yeah.
I thought you said it was one pace forward.
Yeah, so you take it, I'll literally tow you one step, that's it.
Oh, okay.
So I'll be stood fairly close to where the master will be, and you'll be invited, there'll be someone there ushering one group at a time forward, come take a finger, I tow you one step, say those words. Is that okay?
Cool.
Thankfully you don't need to remember anything. Only I do.
Yeah, the phalanx sort of shuffles forward as the ceremony goes on, rather than the people at the back having this massively long walk to reach Paul.
But is everyone else, Clement?
During procession, are we single or in fours? Single file or in fours?
In terms of being presented, you will be in your groups that you've been arranged in the processional order. That will be 4 or fewer, depending on how we've exactly broken it down.
If you're not kneeling, how does that?
If you're not in, you simply stand.
Okay. In front of the.
So you'd stand as close as you can to it, put your hands forward as far as you can. But remind me, have you already informed Victoria that you are not in grand? It'd be worth checking with Victoria just to make sure that they're expecting that. Is everyone else happy? Alex?
In terms of the procession, do you expect families to process with us, or should they already be at Senate House because it's quite a small gap?
Yeah, so they can certainly take photographs, in first court of the chimney, but they have to be also by the Senate House by a certain time.
There's a trade-off. If your family want to take photos of the procession going to the Senate House, then obviously they need to be lining the streets. But that means they'll be at the back of the queue to get into the Senate House, and will therefore have the sort of seats at the back of this, in the balcony. So if they want a good seat in the Senate House, they need to scurry off to the Senate House. If they want to photograph you in action on your way to the Senate House, but there'll be enough time if they do choose to stand on the street and take a photograph to get to the Senate House in time to get in, because we'll aim to arrive with a bit of leeway.
Yeah. I think the only piece of advice I have to give, which I'll remind you again at the photograph, those of you who have been really attentive, if you've been in the web library, you'll see a quotation from scripture saying wisdom is the principal thing. It's a very important thing today. There are no toilets at Senate House. Be wise and use the loo in the break we'll have after this session, and again there should be a bit of a break after the photograph to use the toilet should you need it, because there will be no other opportunity once we start in that procession.
What is session 2 doing while session 1 is completing?
So the people in session 1 will be sent from chapel court to line up in first court, then they'll leave, and then the people in session 2 will be moved from chapel court to first court and then leave.
But
That's right, Marcel, yeah.
well, you can sort of mooch around for a bit, and then you'll be sort of called into your ranks. So there's a chance to take photos or have a coffee or whatever. If you're in the second session, there's a question.
How do parents enter Senate House? What entrance?
So that's a really great question. It's not the same entrance as you. So if your parents look for a kind of little white marquee entrance, that's the entrance they'll go into. It's on the King's Parade side of Senate House. So it's a bit further along from where you get in. Anyone else? No?
So let me pass on my top tip for the avoiding the falling over bit. When you're going to kneel down in front of Ian, just grab your gown like this, and as you kneel, just pull it together like that. That pretty much ensures that it is impossible for the gown to end up over your heels, because there's a danger if Paul has to do the unhooking job, then he's mid-action reaching for your gown when the camera goes click. So your graduation photograph has a lovely picture of you in front of the master and the Praelector looking hassled in the background, as opposed to standing back looking proud, which is what ideally happens.
But congratulations. I'm so pleased for all of you. You really deserved this grand celebration today. You've worked so hard, and we're all really, really proud of you.
Yeah, indeed.